Ahsoka, Balance of Truth, Book 1, Chapter 5, 1 BBY. Palpatine's curiosity piqued at the prospect of the Jedi's disappearance through Vader's words, prompting a deeper study into the mysteries of the ancient Jedi temples. Lost to him were the archaic motifs and glyphs utilized by Jedi millennia ago to dissuade engagement of, or revelation of, the temple's functioning. Despite the endless assets at his disposal, he could only conduct research for the time being himself. The anger welled up instantly at yet another failed attempt to decipher the glyphs uncovered on Jedha months before. It had been instantly quarantined, and all but a few of the Emperor's advisors were even aware of the discovery. Had the Jedi enacted similar protocols while seated in power, they would have thwarted, no doubt, the grand plan of the Sith in short order. Arrogance breeds complacency, he commented to himself. Vader's discovery and subsequent report of events on Malachor had been 6 months prior, affording him time to set to decrypting the various glyphs found outside and inside the temple. To no avail yet, it seemed as though the Sith themselves had no prior knowledge of the extent the Jedi had gone to cover their achievements in shrouded mystery. There were various mentions of the glyphs themselves, but they were in name only, or a hand-drawn replica entered into one of the texts by Sith long since past. He relished the opportunity to increase his knowledge of the dark side, of the Force in general, so this posed a challenge, albeit one of many. Present day. Compliance with Vindal customs and reporting are a must. CC-32 at your service, and may I commend you and congratulate you, Captain, voiced the multicolored protocol droid who had padded over to Ahsoka from the customs bay. Congratulate me? For what? She questioned. Surviving. After the initial sonic boom, I had placed your odds of survival at 43%. Seeing no deceleration upon entering lower atmosphere, I recalculated your odds of survival at 21%. The inverted climb and full power down placed your... I get the idea. Captain Tano, Master Survivalist, at your service, CC-32, she retorted mockingly with a low bow to complement the sarcasm. Is it your intention to register your... He glanced at the hewing vessel with his photoreceptors and returned to facing Ahsoka. Ship, with the Vindal Custodial Department, he finished. Something from the ship caught Ahsoka's attention. She sensed something structurally failing internally and immediately started backing away from the ship, cautioning CC-32 to do the same. He made a concerted effort to follow the advice. 2 loud cracks were followed by this port landing gear snapping off, shearing the hydraulic struts and puncturing what remained of the fuel cells directly above. Run! Ahsoka shouted. The astromech, not taking any chances, fired its propulsion jets and its forward struts, taking it completely over the wall and well out of eyesight. My survival is inherent in my ability to amble away from imminent danger on faulty servo motors servicing my lower appendages in a hastened manner. My odds of survival are approximately 1.2% and decreasing with haste, CC-32 calculated in less time than it took to say. Ahsoka wheeled around when she approached what she believed was a safe distance to help the droid increase his odds when the ship's total weight dropped with a thud on what was left of the protruding hydraulic shaft. The precarious fuel cell was forcibly pushed into the plasma conduit and straight up into the frayed and actively sparking wires. The explosion was instantaneous and catastrophic to the ship, the landing pad, half the facility, and the doomed droid. The thick and unyielding tangle of grasses, root exposed shellwhite trees, scrub brush, and carrick vines made travel difficult through the gloomy swamps of ever-present fog and mist on most of Dagobah. Communicative, exiled Jedi Master strode through the maze of life with little effort. Exhausted from the effort needed to communicate through force projection, he took a moment to catch his breath and give his aging knees a well-deserved break. The projection was easy. He had mastered that skill some 500 years earlier and had been actively teaching it for 300. Out of necessity, Obi-Wan had picked up the basics early into their exile, but still lacked the skill to manifest outside Tatooine, leaving the extensive efforts to Yoda. A resounding ripple in the Force had nearly knocked him over 3 days prior, which he had been contemplating with Obi-Wan's aid for the last hour. However, his suspicion affected his thoughts on the matter the most. An unobstructed vision of Ahsoka Tano embracing the Sith and the galaxy plunged into another war far removed from its borders. Deep space brought blackness, no light, only dark and the threat of a bleak nothing. He had seen her bleeding her sabers. He had seen her exacting aggressive resolve with hate-burned eyes in some silent conquest of a power he had never known her to covet. He had seen her with outstretched hands sending feverish bolts of lightning into her victims, crushing their necks with a clenching of her fist, crushing their skulls with an arcing palm, bringing down buildings with the stomp of her foot or a single-handed force wave. It was the garish, blood-drenched, hate-twisted face he would remember, though, and in respect, the gratification that was there in the end. This conflicted with anything he had seen previously. In fact, Ahsoka had never been the subject of, nor played a part in, any of his premonitions prior. Occurred something has. Altered the balance it did. To what degree I am uncertain, but carefully we must tread in the days to come, he had stated to Obi-Wan. Master Yoda, I see nothing to that end. We've been wrong before, quite wrong in fact, Obi-Wan replied. That Ahsoka is alive is of no surprise. She's proven more resourceful than most of us ever gave her credit for. The premonition should be taken objectively at this point. To consider it as literal would defy everything she's ever stood for in the past. Therefore, my counsel is to look upon the symbolic meaning. Take your meaning, I do, but deeper this stems. To affect the destinies of all we've worked to achieve. Guides we are, and nothing more, but speak to her I must. Answers to those questions only she can give that will shed more light on coming events, Yoda said, more to himself. We have no idea where she is, Master Yoda, and are in no position to seek her out, counseled Obi-Wan. Do I must, through the Force. Guide her I will, decided Yoda. Yoda attempted as much 3 times. He could manifest himself through the Force in various locations and reach out from that point to determine his objectives. Usually, he employed it either in his defense or aiding Obi-Wan to defend his efforts on Tatooine from any incoming threat. His latest attempt was from a focal point of crossing ley lines on Iriadu. From there, he could project his reach incredibly far and was confident something, was heard. Patience was Yoda's greatest virtue, as hope was his second. He would be relying on both in the coming days. Ahsoka, confused and more than a little shaken up, could hear the single klaxon blaring on repeat from what she guessed was a stationed garrison some distance away. Answering her questions about Imperial occupation immediately, and having already been prepared for the presence, she ducked behind crates piled up a meter from the wall's edge on the far side of what was left of the spaceport. A squad of stormtroopers striding through the front entranceway with blasters leveled at the scene didn't know where to start. Faced with another decision that could lead to unimaginable consequences, she decided to wait it out instead of leaping out from behind the crates, sabers ignited and tearing through them. Patience, Ahsoka, she counseled herself. The squad lead approached the burning remains of the ship cautiously, but was quickly convinced the scene was secure. Issuing orders to search the remaining undamaged area of the port, he focused briefly on the stack of crates and pointed 2 fingers toward them. Preparing herself for some mind alterations, she began to pull the Force toward her. Still, she was caught off guard by the female lieutenant, a Miri Allen female lieutenant, who had just graced the scene with her presence. In a calming voice, she both gave orders and invited suggestions from the squad captain, who was just as taken aback by her appearance as Ahsoka was grateful for it. She couldn't stop the deluge of emotion running to her forefront of thought, immediately that of Barriss or Master Unduli, but this Mary Allen was neither. The facial tattoos were earborne and wrapped delicately down her cheekbones to cradle her chin in geometric patterns of triangles and squares. With deep olive skin, black lips, and hair cropped up into the formal Imperial cap, this newcomer alerted the captain to a droid that was seen leaving the area moments after the explosion. Assuring that the current scene was under control, she directed the remaining 4 stormtroopers to exit the small port and begin hunting the droid down. Ahsoka absently wondered when the Empire began promoting non-human officers, but suppressed her curiosity upon witnessing the compliance of the effective troopers. The lieutenant chased them the remainder of the way out with her gaze before brandishing twin blasters concealed in her belt, and immediately peppered the few but active cams on constant watch. Satisfied either I or Tech wasn't watching her, she tossed the blasters to the ground and tore off the Imperial cap. "Togruta, you are clear. Follow me, and we'll get out of this mess," she declared. Ahsoka sensed neither derision nor intent, but wasn't keen on letting someone else direct her actions. "I saw some of the most daring piloting I've ever witnessed not 5 minutes ago, and I'm offering you an immediate way out of the mess you created without bringing up the fact you ruined my minor. I suppose I just brought it up now, but that's beside the point. My droid will lead them away from here, but only for a few moments to make our escape. I'm heading to my ship and leave your fate in your own hands." The Mirialan, long black hair now flowing to her mid-back, was staring directly in her direction. Ahsoka noticed the sides were shaven to the skin, but the 2 purple streaks running from scalp to shoulder held her attention. True to her word, the Mirialan turned heel immediately and made for the exit. Intent, trust, and belief, all checking Ahsoka's perceptive intuition. In reading the Mirialan's emotions, Ahsoka could feel no hesitation, reservation, or malice present, but being cautious had kept her alive through some very harrowing predicaments. Her options were few. There were no other vessels in the remnants of the tiny port, and the Mirialan mentioned she had one. The Imperial presence provided a reason to leave immediately. The Mirialan mentioned her minor, which Ahsoka took to mean the ship she had destroyed, which she was oddly fine with. Exhaling her breath, Ahsoka decided to trust in this newcomer, and she gently removed herself from behind the crates. Exiting the port, Ahsoka followed the Mirialan at a distance, and was more than a little surprised to see her boarding a Corellian freighter, a YT-1760, abandoning all reservations upon hearing the footfalls of incoming troopers. She dashed to the boarding ramp, already starting to close, ducking her head as it made its final push to seal itself. "Kawani is the name, and you are?" questioned the Mirialan as Ahsoka finally made her way to the cockpit. Ahsoka was taken aback at first glance. For the most part, the control was as she remembered it should be. Still, there was an immense amount of retrofitting done to incoming and outbound signal relaying. An oversized data screen tied into both, as well as banks of key switches, scrambling knobs, and interference toggles that were where the co-pilot should have been. "Ahsoka," she said flatly, watching Kawani run through her pre-flights with adept hands, not once taking her eyes off the control panel. "Well, Ahsoka, welcome to the Liberator. That name seems to be more ironic all the time. Ahsoka, liberated from her predicament," she said with no trace of sarcasm. A proximity sensor flashing with a cadenced high-pitched beep echoing through the cabin was answered by Kawani hitting the switch to open the central top hatch, through which the same R3 droid was slowly descending. "You've already met R3. He mentions that your piloting skill defies logic and should not be statistically possible. He is also curious about how you survived." She relayed the statement of boops, bleeps, whines, and whistles. "Thank you, but I am quite fluent in astromech," Ahsoka played for some humor. "We'll have much to talk about, Ahsoka, on multiple topics, I'm hoping," she chuckled, catching Ahsoka's intended verbiage. "But in due course. Let's get off this rock first," Kawani casually stated as she finished prepping the ship and began lifting off. Ahsoka, well learned in many vessels, particularly those of CEC design and build as of late, was more than a little curious at the sounds this ship was making. What was most notable were the sounds it shouldn't be making. The bank of sublight engines churned the ground after the ship as the repulsors lifted it just far enough off its pad to fire it off the planet and into high orbit. Ahsoka could feel her entire body relax as they entered real space quicker than she had anticipated. She let herself fall into the seat adjacent to Kawani. Not at all trusting of anyone at the moment, she was hesitant to let herself get too relaxed. Gallipoli, this is TSS 3145, scheduled departure from Vindal Garrison, prepping to dock for ground crew rotation and renewed supplies. Kawani transmitted to a static-laced incoming relay from the light cruiser as usual. Ahsoka, for only an instant, felt betrayed. Nothing to worry about, my Togrutan friend, just making sure the path is clear. She had heard her, assured her, feeling Ahsoka tense at the transmission. And now to make sure they think we're that stupid shuttle. Ahsoka watched in animated disbelief as Kawani spun to the bank of switches and pulled up the shuttle's transmission codes and ship signature, as well as a manifest of 6 troopers and 14 empty supply crates, and sent them all to the waiting ship without batting an eyelash. Affirmative, TSS 1345. You have your clearance. Bay 2. And just like that, we're in Echo, Kawani confidently stated. Ahsoka had seen signature manipulation before, but never on this scale. Her mouth was wide in astonishment, and Kawani couldn't help but laugh. The Gallipoli and I go way back. Well, about a year back anyway. But that relationship is more one-sided than even they realize. She couldn't contain her laughter, as this was her first audience, and she was not one to brag. She'd never actually transmitted with anyone else in the cockpit with her, aside from R3. I had them convinced I was the executor once. I could almost hear the nervousness from their end after I conveyed Lord Vader's displeasure and insistence to speak to the commander at once, she announced for emphasis. Ahsoka briefly winced at the name, but was determined to focus on the here and now. At any rate, we can exit the system while they wait on a shuttle that'll never arrive. Ahsoka exhaled profoundly and felt every muscle in her aching body answer back slowly. She let escape an audible sigh. Ahsoka, I intend to extend my absolute interest in your piloting skills and how they may or may not lay into some sort of mutual benefit for both of us, Kawani stated with absolute sincerity. She began to swivel in Ahsoka's direction and hesitated, only briefly, on seeing the weapons attached to her waist before catching Ahsoka's eyes in her gaze. In the time it took to complete the swivel, Kawani felt assured she had adequately analyzed the situation. You destroyed my miner. You got it off Malachor, much less jumped it, and didn't die. That's the first reason you're here. At this point, I don't care about the miner. The process was becoming less profitable with each excursion anyway. The mechanical skill it took to get it up spaceworthy and all that followed is where my interest begins. You're in desperate need out of this system, which is where your interest in me begins. Your presence assures me that is the case, so to get things out of the way, where are you headed? I have my agenda, of course, but I can match that agenda to the direction traveled easily enough. The candor struck Ahsoka, who desperately appreciated it. Honestly, I have no idea. Ahsoka was just as surprised to say it as Kawani clearly was to hear it. Well, that will be an issue, but we'll get to that. Considering your affiliation with decidedly religious connections, we'll get a little more rimward and move toward hut space. Coming full circle to my agenda, as it were, I have some refined clouds on 36 I can unload near Nalhada, Kawani concluded. Ahsoka was honestly grateful for someone else taking the lead and giving her a chance to let herself release some tension. Kawani, Ahsoka started. Get some rest, Ahsoka. The crew cabin is to the left, Kawani answered without hesitation. I sincerely appreciate that. Would it be okay to send a message before I do? Consider this your home, until it's not, of course. Yes, I don't have a table, but the emitter and holo console are back there to the left, she said with a thumb pointing in the direction beyond the cockpit doorway. Again, thank you, Kawani, Ahsoka said, feeling a deepening calm. She exited the cockpit and turned the corner into the console Kawani mentioned. She switched it on and fed the access screen the connection data, only to be disconnected immediately. She eyed her output array and confirmed nominal settings, putting everything in order. She reduced latency and maxed the boost to the signal relay. Granted, her transmission's terminus was on the other end of the galaxy, but the hardware in this vessel is more than capable. She keyed in the code again. The transmission was accepted this time, and she immediately switched on the scrambler. Turning her attention to the feed, she realized it was muted and the video was frozen. Hello? Hera? Sabine? She verbally grasped. Anyone? Apologies. We're right in the middle. The video was still absent, but clipped audio was filtering through. Whoever answered the call was not in any position to engage completely. What's going on? This is full. She hesitated, unsure if calling attention to herself was in her or their best interest. Sensing the situation was dire, she forced a deep breath. This is Ahsoka Tano. Who is this? There was static, and a second later, the familiar face of a clone came into focus through an entire video feed. Not just any clone. Wolf was answering her call. Commander? General? Not sure how to address you, Ahsoka, only that seeing your face is amazing. You're doing well? The flickering hollow image voiced. I'm, doing fine. Not expecting a greeting, she was momentarily lost for words. What's going on? Where is Hera? The General is currently in the Imperial Command Center planetside. We're engaging in basic bioorganic recruitment. Wolf, clearly unsure how to respond without sounding like a lunatic. You know answers like that answer nothing at all, right? Ahsoka said, rolling her eyes. Always a trooper. How about this, Captain? Are you in need of assistance? Actually, no. It looks like Bridger pulled another miracle from his pocket. Wolf responded, both hands up in the air, shrugging. Ezra is there? Ahsoka stood from the seat. Well, not here precisely. Chop says he's on the Chimera, Thrawn's flagship. Okay, where's Chop then? She was getting confused quickly. Oh, he's with Hera. In the Imperial Command Center, Ahsoka said flatly. That's right, yeah, Wolf confirmed. Rex, let me guess, also at the Command Center. Affirmative, General. Working to re-engage the dome shield, sir. The soldier and Wolf beginning to re-emerge. The siege is happening then, Ahsoka said more to herself. Please let me know if there's anything I can do. I'll try contacting you later if I don't hear from you first, Captain. Yes, sir, yes. Yes, sir, yes. Wolf saluted, that ended the transmission. Ahsoka sat back and smiled inwardly. Ezra had pulled it off after all. Knowing full well, it had just as much to do with the company the young man kept. She realized she needed his presence for reasons that weren't too difficult to identify. He, like her, had known a lifetime of loss, and with his master's recent demise, the wounds would still be fresh for them both. Feeling accomplished, she switched off the gear and padded back to Kawani. That was a relief, thank you again, she said before turning to head back to the ship's cabins. Kawani suppressed a smile, knowing precisely what Ahsoka meant. She was all too happy to ease the Togruta. She turned her attention to the console before her, and with coordinates dialed into the Navi computer, the Liberator entered the spiraling nexus of hyperspace.